I'd like to call the Finance Committee meeting for June 16th, 2021 to order. Roll call, Mr. Ivy and Tom Fellner. Ms. Earlston is absent. Could I have a motion to accept her absence?
I'll make the motion.
Mr. Ivy makes the motion. I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ms. Earlston is excused. Approval of the minutes, if we've had a chance to look them over from the May 19th regular meeting. I'd like a motion to approve the minutes and have them entered into record.
I'll make the motion.
Mr. Ivy makes the motion. I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 2-0, and the regular minutes are accepted. I do have another correction to the discussion item, and I would like to propose it as the first, and that is some CARES Act idea. Ms. Ault has shared some of her ideas, and since she is not a member of the committee and there is not a quorum here, I've invited her to give her some ideas. I'm also putting her first so that I don't think she brought a snack for tonight's lengthy meeting, so she could leave if she wants to. So I'd like to have a motion to approve the amended agenda.
I'll make the motion.
Mr. Ivy makes the motion. I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries, and the amended agenda is approved. So with that, let's go into the discussion items, and we're going to focus some ideas on the CARES dollars that need to be dispensed and dispersed in 2021. We've had several discussions, and the mayor has put forth some ideas. I think he challenged us at the last meeting to come up with some, and so Ms. Ault has some discussion points, and I'd like to invite her to go ahead and give us a rundown on what that entails.
Thank you, Dr. Fellner. Whenever I started thinking about this, I thought back to a conversation that Mayor O'Leary and I had a few months back about transportation barriers in Galion and Crawford County, and kind of, is this a way that we could think of a way to utilize these monies to increase economic development and employability in Crawford County. So, you know, with talking to Mayor O'Leary, this may not be a CARES Act. It might not meet all the requirements, but still definitely worth conversation about possible funding from other sources at a later time. And my idea was kind of to develop a program where different agencies, whether it be public, private, employers, really anybody who would want to write in a plan for how they could increase the availability of hours for transportation to and from work from Galion citizens to jobs in Crawford County, to kind of get some different things moving and more workers to work in Crawford County. So that is kind of my initial thoughts. I shared those thoughts with Dr. Fellner and Mr. Ivy and Mayor O'Leary, as well as a couple of other individuals in the county. I reached out to the Ohio Means Jobs Coordinator, Angela Neff, and got a letter of support for, and really a good understanding of the way that transportation is a barrier to employability and economic development in Crawford County. I also have an appointment scheduled with Amber Wortman of United Way, Mr. Frank House of the Crawford Partnership. I have received data from a couple of different staffing agencies about the denials and refusals to work for different kinds of placements within Galion and Crawford County. And between 80 and 85% of those, I can't go to that job site, is because they don't have access to that transportation. So kind of thinking on all of those different pieces and parts, I started reaching out to try to gather any kind of data that I could, and I was lucky enough to get a hold of some of the transportation surveys that were taken back in 2014, as well as some information from Council on Aging about their denials for out-of-service hours, and just really a good idea of kind of what the need is in the community at this time. So I think that this would be a worthy way to use these dollars if it would be allowable. And would like to discuss any questions that the committee might have about these dollars and kind of open the conversation.
Questions, comments?
I don't. I mean, we had a nice lengthy discussion via the telephone, and all the questions that I had, I felt were answered more than sufficiently.
This evening, you mean?
No, when she
Oh.
called me last week,
Okay.
just on the telephone.
So I'm still waiting to receive some data from Macy Moore at the Department of Transportation as requested by Tom Barstow, the Dual Transit Program Coordinator, and I have a follow-up telephone call with them to get some information. Also, Tim Masico, I may be misspeaking, he's the mobility manager for Crawford, Marion, and Morrow counties to discuss the knowledge of his issues going on in Crawford and surrounding counties. I put my feelers kind of out to a lot of different agencies that may have information and statistics about this, and also done a lot of research on transportation and economic development and how that can, bring, new businesses and jobs here if they know they're going to have workers. I have some information from the Ohio State University College of Food and Agriculture. If anyone would like, I can share that with them via email. And it talks a lot about the economic development piece of available transportation for a lot of different hours. So the transportation options that we have now are great if we can only work Monday through Friday first shift. But anything else, we're really kind of just hoping that people can get a ride or walk to work, which is hard to do in the summer and the winter and far away. So I'm hoping that we can kind of move on with the conversation.
Sure.
My reaction to that, just that last comment, is that being on the public sector side, I've been encouraged to spend time on that by the private sector, and when you go to launch with the private sector, you put some money up or an idea, that demand doesn't seem to crystallize like it could. I don't think it's been worked on hard enough. Meaning that I didn't say it very well. The second shift employers that are looking for entry-level talent, they know they need to get workers there. They'll tell you that. But they're haven't been real interested in making a contribution to that kind of program.
Right.
The other thing I just say, before I reinforce the idea that I think we could take some of the Recovery Act money. The other thing about Ohio Means Jobs is every one of these person with unlimited transit, don't have, their own rides. Everyone. Many of them have minor children. So they're all TANF eligible. So as like at the county level, as you proceed that, I would ask them to do more than cheerlead. I would say get in there and block and tackle. We'll even give you the ball if you want to. But there's TANF money that is, if you spent 3 hours on it, you'd be pretty upset to see how TANF dollars are used in Crawford County these days. So I really think that Ohio Means Jobs, they ought to be a partner. If the city were to contribute some of our money, and there isn't a lot of TANF money, then I think we're going to end up underfunding any sort of proposed regular service.
And from my conversations with Angela back and forth over the past couple of days, it definitely seems like they're on board to be kind of a partner. And she's said, she would like to have a seat at the table if we do have these discussions to see kind of what we can do to work together, as well as, a couple of the different, even just staffing agencies. So I talked to one, and they not only staff the Gallion area, but they also staff Marysville, the Honda plant. And they have 865 jobs that they're trying to fill in Marysville. And they've hired a company that comes in with these 15-passenger vans and picks people up in Marion and drives them to Marysville for free every day for work, because people just can't get from Marion to Marysville. And the the wages are so much higher if we can get out of county or out of city to do this so that people can save up money to get a car. You know, you aren't having to work, you know, so many hours, or maybe just for the lower wages, it's a little bit more competitive if you've got a ride outside of your home community, which of course we want to focus on galleon jobs, but sometimes if we're working with those individuals who may have lost their car, maybe a higher paying job would be a good start, especially those who, you know, are on benefits or maybe have late fees or court fees or dues that they need to pay. Those higher paying jobs are definitely well worth the thought on how to get people there.
That was, you sort of answered my question. What types of transportation are you looking at? I mean, it's far beyond SCAT.
So my idea was kind of so since we already have SCAT and Council on Aging that are operating well in this county, I think that if we could figure out a way to offer them funding to say, if we can give you this much money, can you offer your drivers a shift differential to pick up these extra hours? The buses aren't being used right now anyways. And SCAT currently has 38 buses that they use. They don't run after 5 o'clock. They don't run on the weekends. So we have the possibility, if we can incentivize them to hire workers to drive those buses, the buses are available. That would make sense. You know, there's other, in Bucyrus, I guess that they have 24-hour taxis. I was unaware of that until just a couple days ago. And you can, and Angela told me this, that if they have a program where it's $60 a week for round trip. It's for 5 round trip ways, any hours in Bucyrus, the Bucyrus taxi service will take you. So could we incentivize Bucyrus Taxi to come over to Galleon? Could we think about what a taxi service want to open up in Galleon? How could we support them initially to kind of get that cost going, to see that there are definitely people who need these rides and who want to do this. In 2020, Council on Aging had to deny 292 rides because of out-of-service time, and in 2019, before the pandemic, it was 360 denials.
Say those numbers again.
360 in 19 and 292 in 2020. And that's just one agency. And Council on Aging primarily serves individuals 60 or over with disabilities. And if there are open seats after those folks are served, then other people can ride. So SCAT wasn't able to get those figures to me yet. They are working on it. So it seems like, you know, the need is there just with that one agency. Almost 400 rides in 2019 were denied because they couldn't get them there out of hours.
This is what I'd envision, and have talked with the people at SCAT, is in the neighborhood of 150 to 200,000. I know it's like, well, that's kind of a big neighborhood, but in that range, they would do 3 frequencies. They would do 3 round trips from, and I think that has to be looked at, whether it's from Galleon to Ontario to shop and go to school or go to medical appointments, or if it's more traditional, you know, one county, Crawford County, everybody wants to go to Bucyrus, you know, did you know that? So that both those routes, sort of a Galleon to Bucyrus back and forth, had been talked about back in 14. Nobody ever wanted to put up any money. It's sort of, I think, it's been sloughed off by municipal governments, both because they're not great resources. There's no dedicated funding source. But it's kind of, well, aren't they TANF eligible? Isn't that the county's responsibility? Don't they select the vendors for the aged and disabled grant and then the general public transit? That's what SCAT does. Their grant is our bus service. So anyway, I was looking more at getting 3 frequencies. That's what we talked about. And then what they would do once they're here with SCAT, they would then have demand response. Now, I don't know if second shift, that you call right now, I need a ride to get to work, my car broke down. I'm not sure how you do extended hours.
Yeah.
But what they said was if somebody shows up at the depot next year and things are done, and there's a bus, they won't have to call the day before. They'll get them a ride to where they're going. So I think I think we've neglected it. I think that employers, I said at the beginning on this, is that I don't think they take the public sector very seriously. And I've grown to be a little bit frustrated because you'll have talks with, I won't name any of the companies, oh yeah, we'll really work with you, and then you go to set up the service and it never congeals. So maybe it just needs to be tried again.
What's TANF?
Temporary assistance to needy families. It's the welfare block grant. And I don't want to speak too far out of school on this, but they get money to pay staff and they get money to run programs to assist needy families. And it'd be an interesting thing for the media to look at how Crawford County uses their TANF. I'm told they don't send it back to Columbus anymore. They were sending $1 million back. And Ann's a really cool person, but if she comes to a meeting, ask Cassandra, the director, to give her the checkbook, or have Cassandra go, because that's been an issue getting them to what. And I keep looking over here at Kerry like he's going to vouch for it. You know, like put a couple $100,000, and then you could really have a serious. You could see if people would ride public transit. So anyway, it's everybody drive their own car to tonight's meeting. I thought so. So until you don't, did you walk?
No, I could have.
Oh, you took the company car, so you're even more privileged.
No, it's my car.
So the
I said it for a long time, care about this, and I've said it. Until you've been without transportation, either on a real temporary basis. I don't mean your car broke down and you had a panic attack, had to get to Walmart on time. But I mean, you can't get to work, your whole life goes to heck. You really, it's a humbling experience, opportunity to work around people who truly are. So I don't think we do enough, and everybody knows we have. The reason our median income is so low is we've got older, poorer people and under or unemployed poor people. There's people in this town making a lot of money on the upper end, but it's that bottom 20% of wage earners. That's what drags down our median income.
One thing I thought was pretty interesting in that 2014 survey that I looked at was there's this one area south of Galleon where households in this one area, between about 11.5% to 20% of those households have no vehicle at all. So a lot of households have one vehicle, so one person can work, or and then one person stays home, or they have to try to share the vehicle back and forth. But if we have a place in town where we have maybe up to 20% of households that have no vehicle available at all, how are they, getting anywhere that they need to go?
Sure.
I thought that was interesting, just to kind of look at what those surveys showed, even just, those 7 years ago, but I'm sure it has to be pretty similar to this day. And then just kind of some other things that I was thinking about whenever I was kind of trying to think creatively was trying to invest a little bit of money, if we could, into upskilling and reskilling our current workers. So I don't know if that's CARES Act money available or not. Whenever I look at the definition, it's so broad. There's those three things. I was thinking about, if we're going to be putting this kind of money into maybe more entry-level workers, what can we do to help companies and individuals who are more mid-level? Can we provide some scholarships to CU Lead? Can we do some reimbursements for ServSafe training, first aid, CPR, any kind of training that those people need where businesses right now, because maybe they don't have the employees, or the business is down because people aren't going out as much and they're still kind of recovering from pandemic times. They don't have the money to get those individuals certified in the things that they may have used to, and people aren't moving up in the company as much, or they don't have the same opportunities that they would have had if the businesses were doing better, had a little bit more funding to support those kind of growth activities. So, I think kind of looking at how we can use the money to make our community a little bit more accessible for workers, and especially keeping the workers that we have. I think I see a lot on, $1,000 new hire bonus, but we don't have a lot of retention bonuses. Like, if you stayed here through this entire pandemic, we'll give you $1,000. So how can we reinvest in the employees that we have in Crawford County and help the agencies that already are doing that?
They have tools over there, and they have TANF dollars, and they should be challenged. I agree with everything you're saying. They should be challenged. What are you using those TANF dollars? Your eyes will pop out of your head. It's not that they're bad programs and bad uses, but I don't think they're. Once upon a time, we were doing a couple hundred OJTs, which is another really good tool right now. People are looking for hires. You've got a lot of displaced workers, I think maybe voluntarily displaced. And there's a real neat program that JFS has over there. Used to use it a lot, lots and lots. That's where I would address that part of it. But if I'm Doc, what it looks like, I'm gonna jump on the CARES Act, that much as our law director determined that the stormwater rebate really wasn't there was no way to affect that. Was it 2-3 months ago? The same will apply with the American Recovery dollars. I believe the state auditor is going to talk with local officials, but I was at a meeting yesterday to talk about dividing up the Biden bucks. And the Auditor Faber had talked with county officials just the day before. And his advice was it's a water program. At least that's what they heard. But it's whatever your prosecutor, your county prosecutor, or your law director interprets that act, they are not going to, if there's an ordinance that divides money up in a certain way, law director says it's within that, council passes it, that's
the Recovery Act money.
right. It's also kind of true with CARES Act, but I think it's a more narrow hole to try to get the projects through. So anyway, having said that, I would say that when we get past the CARES Act, the immediate, because I don't think that we'd have much luck in getting your idea kind of qualified under CARES. Because if you're going to start a service, you don't know who that is until they show up, and he shows up. It's like, well, you've been displaced, and they give it. Well, no, man, I'm just trying to get a ride, just trying to get a job. And how do you credit that? So, anyway, we have to figure out what to do with the CARES Act. But I think as the discussion about how flexible we want to be with our allocation of American Recovery dollars, I'm up for that discussion. And I think that it's about $150,000, and we'd have 3 frequencies a day. They'd take a gamble on it. They mean SCAT.
Well, thank you guys so much for listening. And if you guys have any questions, I would feel free to contact me, and I'll send you any information that you might want to look at. And I look forward to having this conversation
Thanks for
again.
the research.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Next discussion item, another guest speaker this evening, Chad Miller.
Hey, can I start on
Gallatin
that?
Port Authority.
I'm sorry.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Gallatin Port Authority loan proposal.
This started 3 months ago. The developer who continues to commit to building residential property on Wrenchville and has made a big commitment. I guess he's got one apartment left. Came to update the port and anyone interested about the status of those projects. The short of it was, there's a wake in seeing lumber prices go way up and maybe coming back down. And it had driven the cost of the next pair of apartments way beyond anybody's ability to finance or whatever. Question was asking, can the port do anything? I think the idea wasn't apparent right away, but there was a discussion about it.
Thank you.
The idea of somehow getting money to the port so that they can help get these buildings started. So that's really where the conversation started. These guys kicked it around. I think you've talked to Giltz a couple times since then. And so that would be the setup for what I think is a really good idea. But it probably needs some reflection. I don't know if you want to rush forward. I don't expect legislation tonight. It'd be great if we did, but, so with, having said that,
Yes, so the focus of this proposal is housing. So I think we've made some tremendous progress. The acquisition of the Wrenchville property for single-family housing development was big. So when Grant came, we really wanted to focus on that because he has the option to buy those first 5 parcels there. And, just wanted to take his temperature on where that stood, where he thought, we might see a housing start. That kind of evolved into a conversation about not only that project, but his project out at Carter Crossing. So his intention all along was to pretty much start both of those projects simultaneously. It's more efficient, obviously, for him, use of resources, already having contractors hired, machinery in town, all of that, to start building the next apartment building same time he starts a single-family housing. So then it became a discussion about, how can we get there in the current environment? And really it comes down to cost of capital. So he had his folks reprice the building of one additional apartment building, which is 18 units, and I believe it's an 11-unit carport. Don't quote me on the 11. I wrote that down somewhere, but I couldn't find it. But the cost of that, just for the 1 unit, has risen by some $340,000 over the last, year. He said since the last time they priced it. So what he had proposed or had asked is if we had any assets available to sort of help with that, giving him sort of a low-cost loan to be able to sort of bridge that gap in his financing. We immediately started thinking about our revolving loan fund. We prefer to use the assets that we have, which isn't very much at the moment. It's all still predicated on COVID repayment, to pair it with money from the city so that he could then start building those single-family units. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach. The port would be asking for a loan from the city of $300,000, which we would in turn provide to Mr. Giltz for the apartment complex piece of his project. And additionally, the port's going to use the existing funds we have in the revolving loan fund to help support housing starts out at Wrenchville. Based upon the size of what we anticipate to have there currently, Mr. Giltz has committed to more than likely 2 single-family housing units at first. Once those sell, he would build more. But this would give him the ability to get the shovel in the ground, get things rolling. He's obviously spent some money already up front. He has plans. Everything's been approved. The permits are all issued for the apartments. So things are ready to roll. It's just, he really can't support that on his own. What we're looking at, just so you have an idea, is the money from the city would be lent to him on a 5-year balloon. So we would obviously receive payments from him for 5 years. At the end of 5 years, he would either need to pay the loan off in its entirety or refinance the debt either through another agreement with us and the city or through another lender. When we've had these conversations with Tom, and I'll probably not rename the name of the program, where the city has some of these funds invested. The city has some funds that are liquid, that are earning a very low interest rate. We would, propose that we use those funds. So some of those assets, I think it's Star, Ohio, be liquidated. The port would match whatever the interest rate is being paid to the city on those funds. We would build it in. I understand that the rate's variable, so we probably build that into our agreement with Mr. Giltz to have that as a benchmark. We would charge him slightly more than that, not very much, basically enough to cover our legal costs for getting all this put together.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Two questions. Why not, why doesn't this gentleman take a conventional loan out for the apartment complex versus coming to the port? And my second question is, how does this gentleman have access to the necessary lots on the old Wrenchfield property to be a private contractor on property that the city has purchased?
So his access to the lots was part of the agreement for when we acquired the property.
Okay.
He actually had the purchase contract to buy the property. He wasn't, I don't think, sold on developing the entire 11 acres that's out there. So he passed that option along to the port. We purchased it from him and gave him an option as part of the contract to buy the first 5 lots. So he has the ability to do that for at least a year from that contract date. This is your first question. Sorry, I answered the second question first, sorry. The first question is really, it's a cost of capital. So what we're looking at initially is, an interest rate to him of probably 1.25%. Obviously, that may go up. If you listen to what the Fed said today, probably 6 basis points over the next 2 years. But he's not going to be able to secure capital at that low interest rate through a traditional lender. The additional cost then, I think, just puts it out of reach for him.
I think he's gonna set until the construction price comes down, and then he'll proceed. I don't know. I think that he is probably committed as much to this project as he can get a return on investment. And why I like the idea is if we can put together the arrangement, the city is essentially harmless. Through the 5-year period till the balloon happens, it'll be an interest only. So let's say it's, what is it, 0.86, I think now, Rod, Star Ohio?
If that.
Something like that. So, a 1% loan puts us ahead of the game. And then we were just thinking out loud before the meeting about, you probably have some sort of adjuster in there. Heaven forbid rates would go lower, but they probably could go lower, but they might inch upward over that 5-year period. And so, the other issue that I know you've probably been working on since we talked about it is what kind of security. So it's real good. I mean, it's a good deal for the city. We're going to cover our interest earnings. They would pay us back in the contract for the money that we would have gotten through the Star Ohio. So I think that the interest earnings would be there. But you'd have to have some piece of this building that you're going to partially finance. It's a little bit different. If there might be people who think it's better for the city to keep their money sitting in an account earning less than 1%. People might think that's a good idea. I think it's apartments are sold out. Apartments are sold out. He's not going to start the housing. This is my pretty strong view from him. He's not going to start that single-family housing until he finishes what he started. So what they've kind of negotiated with him is, okay, here's a way that we'll build the first one, we'll dig the second basement. We locally think he won't get that thing built. There'll be people driving by, wanting to get a chance to buy it. I think it'll go. I think those houses will go well. So it really, if housing is a priority and getting things moving is a priority, which I think it is, then I think it's worth serious consideration. We'll stay up all night, but sleep on it a little bit. And, I don't think we wait all summer to get an answer, but anyway.
So the next step would be figuring out details, so that.
Yeah, so this would be something that we'd want, just some agreement that this seems like it's a good idea before we go spend money and time on the effort.
Right.
Because, it's going to be something that we'll have to get our legal counsel in touch with Thomas and Mr. Kiltz as well to iron those details out, because to Tom's point, there's some risk there. If he defaults, it's not like the board's got $300,000 to pay back.
Yeah.
So we have to have some security there.
And if he sells it, I mean, everything's for sale, my minivan's for sale.
Yes.
You know,
Correct.
everything's for sale, so, you know, if, we'd have to have that secured, so that if you sell it, then we get our proceeds out of the sale. You can't push the balloon back. I don't even, kind of depend, you wouldn't want to hand the balloon to the next people, but those are, you might. Those are, I think they're not real complicated, there's a handful of details to kind of work through and think through in a 30-day period maybe, and firm it up on the other side with those guys.
Comment? Go ahead, Brad.
How much would an interest rate be out on the open market, just to guess, you know, to be exact?
Oh, boy. That's really difficult to say, because I don't know what the size of his operation is completely, and what this kind of type of facility they have. I can tell you from my personal experience, which is very obviously limited to one lender, we don't touch investment real estate. We wouldn't even do it. But currently, so I think that we consider an apartment complex investment real estate because of the fact that it's a little bit higher risk. We're not in that game at the moment. So I would conservatively guess probably 3 or 4 times what we're going to be charging him.
Well, I think it's that's a good question for Grant or Gilson Associates. They tend to compartmentalize their projects. So this apartment, it's like they got this much committed to it, no more, no less, and when the thing goes up, it just sort of, they shut it down. So they don't, I think they probably are limited on the additional conventional financing. Without this initiative by the city, they'd probably just wait till everything gets back to normal, and a year and a half later, they might start the third building. I think when you look at what's the limited risk for the city, I don't know, I think it's worth priming the pump, so to speak.
I think on the surface, it sounds like a very good idea. We limit the risk and have a secured situation where we can't lose. So I will just say on the surface, it sounds very good to me. Just elementary questions, going back to that 11-acre plot of land. He's acquired 5 plots, is that?
We haven't acquired anything yet.
Okay, well, how many potential, if you're talking about 2 housing sites,
20 plus.
still 20 plus, so we're
Lots
talking
out
about
there.
2.
Yeah, so.
What's a start?
Yes, so there's some additional issues out there that need addressed. Obviously, getting somebody to put a house up would be a monumental accomplishment, just
Yes.
to sort of get the thought process rolling. But the only developable lots right now are on Winchester.
Okay.
And realistically, right now, without any infrastructure commitment, we can more than likely develop 4 of those. The way we've sort of drawn it out, rudimentary, we're going to need a road that goes back there. I don't know what direction that is. South.
Yeah.
At some point in time. So that last lot that's kind of next to the church would almost have to wait until that road really can go in. So there's 4 lots that are developable now that have access to utilities. So those are the easy ones. But he actually has an option on all 5 of those lots that face Winchester. Beyond that, he does not have an option to buy any additional lots. Obviously, so infrastructure is a need out there, obviously, then the old Elliott building, that needs to eventually come down. But I think that the lots that are there on Winchester are easily developable now. And we're talking about single-family housing. I believe that the floor plan that he had showed us is 2-story, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, or 2.5-bath. More than likely, the sales range is going to be between 175 and 225. All have garages, so I mean they're nice houses that I think in the current market will be easily marketable.
Nice. Got to set the first domino up before you tip it over. Have the
I
others
like
fall
the
behind
idea
it.
on those things, but, you know, just putting in 3%, that's only $9,000. I mean, the more he puts into it, the more incentive he'll pay it off sooner, so I was thinking if you get 3 or 4%. somewhere
Well, I
there.
can go back to him and ask him for, I don't think he would be shy about giving us his.
Or something, maybe
yeah.
2-3% margin, whatever, or.
Right.
So,
Remember that old adage, pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. So I've seen a lot of deals killed, Rod, by, yeah, let's just squeeze it for another interest rate. He's just gonna stay up in Canton, and I'll be back down on lumber prices. So, I mean, I don't know.
well, it's all negotiable.
Sure.
Well, what's the difference though between 1% and 3%? $3,000, $6,000. That's really worth killing the deal over, Rod. That's good reasoning.
The only thing I would
How
say
is
is
it
he's a
that-
proven
I know,
investor.
I'm just saying,
Well,
my
that's
response.
what I was gonna say,
I'm
you
not saying you're
know,
wrong.
when the first shovel full of dirt was turned over on the first apartment building,
Right.
everybody in town said, what are you doing? And there's all that. So, you know, you're right. He's got, he's not just coming with a story to tell. He's said, well, you know, here we go. I want to keep this going. So, you know, I'm just going to agree with Mr. Ivy that you've got at least the finance committee's support. You know, and then let's see where it takes us. I think that creativity is going to be paramount in getting over the nightmare of 2020. We don't want to go back to 2019. I don't.
I think that even in 2019, I think moving forward, this is the type of program that I would envision, I don't want to necessarily speak on behalf of the rest of the board members, but the revolving loan fund being used for. You know, to Rod's point, I think, you know, we can talk to Mr. Giltz about it and ask him to provide us with some numbers. I think that's important too, to make sure. You know, it's really to kind of be an unconventional lender so that you can spur a project that may not occur otherwise. Similar to when he built the first 2 apartment complexes or 2 buildings here, without a tax abatement, those may not have gone up. So, you know, it was controversial at the time, it was risky at the time, but so far it's turned out to be I think a good decision, something that's been positive for the community.
Another thing about his character and integrity, when he presented that idea of abatement to council, it was interesting because we did the housing study after that. Basically, everything he had shared in those meetings was confirmed with that study. So the abatement drove those costs down to a level that was affordable per the Danter Group. You know, a lot of people in our community said that was still too expensive, but it proved that it wasn't. You know, they've been leased and rented. So Grant and his brother, both high character, you know, a lot of, you know, we actually did talk to Grant going into this meeting to say, you know, what do you need? Because we do need to earn those investors, and we just happen to have one that's already taken note of us. So
There's a thing in business called goodwill, and we're not giving anything away, but
Right.
not squeezing every little drop goes a long way. It's worth far more than
It sounds like we're on the,
a percentage.
yeah, I'm sorry, Doc.
No, that's okay.
It's just about creating a win-win-win situation for all parties, the city, the builder, and our constituents, you know, so. I'm a firm believer, new housing will bring new businesses in, new businesses will bring new housing in, and, you know, eventually we might get a grocery store, you know, who knows? I'm just kidding, Mayor. Just trying to be humorous, but it sounds like a win-win situation. Don't want to put the cart before the horse or anything like that, but, you know.
Everybody's fine. Okay.
But I think that's positive. We'll kind of work through the details.
So we'll work on the details with
Yeah.
Thomas and everybody and try to bring you something more formal.
I got one.
Oh, certainly.
Although all this does sound fairly good, I didn't hear any discussion or a plan on when the money gets repaid, what the plan is for the money being returned to the city.
Well, the agreement would be that would be repaid to the city then. We would, in our mind, like to make interest payments throughout the term of that 5 years, and then at the maturity, once that loan's been paid back to us, we would then obviously pay off that with the city. So pay interest that whole, 5-year term. and then return the principal basically at the end. It would be a balloon for us as well. Obviously, our ability to repay is going to have to be timed with when he repays us. So,
Well, I'm glad, I think it's worth exploring,
Sure.
you know, how, Gail's right, you gotta define how the money will flow back to the city. I think during the term of the loan, all the interest, whether it's 3% or 1%, whatever, that flows back, that covers the loss of the money that was in Star, Ohio. Couldn't do it without a port, we can't do this. Wacky idea, man.
That is true.
But we have our friends at the Port Authority. They're about as crazy as the mayor. Well, not quite.
That's just 4582.431 is David.
Yeah, that's the
Every time we
code.
talk.
So anyways, that's the idea.
Good. Moving on. Ordinance number 2021-50 has to do with OBWC Transitional Work Grant.
I'll take this.
Yeah.
Apply for a grant from BWC to put together a transitional work plan. That just gets injured workers back to work sooner. It would help us pay for updated job descriptions, which we have not had done since 2003. So at the time that I had looked into this, it was a 75-25 grant. It now changed that they will pay 100% up to $5,200. So I think it's a good idea, in particular, to get those job descriptions updated, but also, allow us a path to get people back to work sooner. We can figure out light duty options and that kind of thing, where we don't really have that now. So we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants. When people come back to work on light duty, we're having to find
Light duty.
rather than having them sit at home for a broken finger and get them in here doing something that's productive and meaningful.
Yeah, we had significant workplace injury. That gentleman's now retired, and really, I think, wanted to come back to work. I think he probably wants to come back to work now. There was no way to transition him from the job that he was severely injured at into anything else. There wasn't a mechanism. Our union contract didn't have a way to be creative on that. I don't know if he'd been happy as a dispatcher or something like that, but there might be other work that he could have transitioned into. We just don't have that. We had another guy who was whose injury, he wasn't able to come back, and his mental and physical health deteriorated significantly. It turned into a chronic workers' comp claim. I don't think anybody involved in it is happy about how that works, in this case particular. So those are just two off the top of my head that I can think of that we just couldn't do anything for. Either you come back to work fit for duty, or take disability retirement. Some people think they won the lotto when they get that, but more often than not, working people want to get back at it. So.
Having this plan will also get us another discount on our annual premium BWC, so it's just another way to lower the rates with them.
Questions?
I'll make a motion to move ordinance 2021-50 on to full council.
Mr. Ivy makes the motion. I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Next item is the VOCA SBAA grant, ordinance 2021-51. This is an annual event, is it?
Yeah, most certainly is.
All right.
This is, if I might, Dr. Feller.
Certainly.
This is what funds our Victims of Crime program for Cedar County that we've been doing for over 20 years. Jim Scott currently does that. It's the only really programmatic piece that comes out of my office. It's a good bang for your buck. There is a cash match, as you'll see. There's a bit over $3,000. But in exchange for that, we get above $16,000 to do the program. A lot of real practical benefit from this that actually impacts lives. And Jim would be happy to sit down with anybody and share with you some of the stories that he has generated over the years. He's been doing it both at the county level and also here at the city of Gannon. But this is, like Dr. Feller said, standard every year we apply, and the funding levels are about the same as they always are.
Questions?
Make a motion to move ordinance 2021-51 onto full council.
Mr. Ivy makes the motion, I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Next item on the agenda, Julia, sympathize with you reading the OPI, ODP, ODOT-PID, the State Route 598 widening ordinance 2021-52.
Yeah, the PID, project identification number, now you've got the lingo
Thank
down.
you.
Okay, that's how ODOT knows the project. There's a time request on this. I'll say, we just got it a couple of days ago. They want it by the end of the month, and they also want us to send them a check by the end of the month. I had talked previously, kind of directing towards the auditor's office, that we can escrow that money. So I'll follow up between now and next council meeting, see whether or not we have to send them the check, or we can escrow that 122 and change that you see in the ordinance. Okay? Some people may say this is a hypocritical point of view, but I think there's a difference between using our capital improvements fund for resurfacing streets and alleys, which has been a discussion that I've had with citizens in the last couple of months talking about the use of the capital improvements fund. But I think this project is different than simply resurfacing. So, gee, Mr. Mayor, we're going to come up with that $122,000. That is additional money. We should, if we knew, we would have asked the Public Works Commission for some more money. But when they actually, engineers' estimate for this project came out, it was $122,000 more. So what I'm recommending, so that Gail can feel comfortable certifying, which is the other thing that we need to do, availability of funds, that I'm recommending that we go ahead and utilize some of the remaining capital improvements funds. So people saying, well, I thought you said that wasn't good for roadway. I think the useful life on this project is much more than you would get if we used it to pave streets and alleys. So anyways, that's the proposal about, where we'll fund this additional local share.
That's out there, Brent Road and 598.
Yeah, it's all the way from Arby's to the light. Yeah, 3-lane. It's the big, what I call the big project.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Questions? Gail, is that acceptable? I mean, or do you have any questions or concerns?
I have a question of concern. Our gap is not completed, and when we transferred some money out of that for infrastructure improvements out there for the Freeze project, we didn't transfer all the money because we have an obligation to the state on a gap that has not been completed yet. My concern is, do we have that much extra in there that we can afford to?
what capital improvements, what's the
talking
amount in
about-
question? What's I've heard that before, but it's like has no commas and very little numbers.
Well, we're waiting on the report from the state, which I've had very brief conversations with them, and it is to be coming. But from the gap, we'll have adjustments to make. I don't remember what those figures are off the top. Well, we don't have solid figures from the state as to what will be transferred, and I don't recall or have the solid figures in front of me from what we had used before with that. But Gail is correct. You'll recall we didn't use all of those funds because we're unsure of
What
the
we're
gap.
gonna need for the gap.
To make that correction.
Well, the other way we can do it, and this might find some technical, I don't want to, the gap, you know what?
I
Okay,
clarify.
all right,
Thank you.
so. the gap accounting that takes our cash and turns it into accrual is becoming something that I don't want it to get in the way of doing projects. I'm sensitive to the, not wanting to overdraw that, but there's several $100,000. There was not even close to that transfer. That this amount in question that keeps being brought up wasn't even close to that. And you can't even tell me what item it is that the adjustment's on. So it's pretty frustrating. So if you don't want to go that way, how about some of the $7 million, most of that is unappropriated, it's in the general fund. My problem with the gap as a reason not to move this forward is we've spent years and a lot of money getting this close to the project. And because there's an increase in costs at the end of the process, there's an effort because of the gap, we're not going to take the $3 million. We're not going to move ahead with the project. That seems foolish. So another thing that council can do is you could supplementally appropriate from unappropriated general fund dollars. So maybe there'll be some objection over there from that too, but.
If council wants to use the capital money, they can, but then in the end, if the gap comes back and we're short, we're gonna have issues. That's all,
Yeah, the issues,
we're
and they'll make.
following guidance from the
We're
state
just
auditor's
throwing a
office.
warning out there that there could be issues.
Always give us the state auditor stuff. I never see it in writing. Never see it in writing. The state auditor warns this. I don't, if there is an adjustment that exceeds the amount, then council would have to make good on that adjustment. But to me, it doesn't, it could go either way. We could use general fund dollars. There's no communities around here of our size that have done as good a job of building up reserves in the general fund. I'd say that's probably where we go if y'all don't want to use the capital improvements fund.
The $122,000 is needed to complete the project, though. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
it's needed
Regardless
to
of how
go
it's
ahead and
funded?
they just won't sell the project. That'd be pretty smart, wouldn't it?
How much have we already put into the project, give or take?
Well, I think the engineering was $700,000-800,000. We spent a lot of money acquiring the property. We whacked somebody out there last year.
That was all the
Huh?
ordinances that we passed last year.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, somebody got killed out there.
Yeah.
So let's not do the project. It's like, we gotta find a way to do that.
Can I have a motion to?
I'll make the motion.
Yeah, Rod, you had
You
something?
can
I'm sorry.
replenish the fund on the back end too, so, I mean, you don't
Right.
have to really do it right now, do you? I'm not just asking. a
No,
question.
you could do it if there is an adjustment that exceeds the amount in the capital improvements fund, then you would have to make good on that. You don't want to take a citation or a finding against us. I'm not suggesting.
I'll make a motion to move ordinance 2021-52 on to full council for consideration.
Mr. Ivy makes the motion, I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Next discussion item is tree trimming bid, ordinance 2021-53. I see the pointing towards Ms. Ward.
Yeah, I didn't even recognize the company that's in the ordinance. No, it says authorizes live tree bidding. This is to authorize the bidding.
Yes.
Excuse
So
me.
you have a company in there? That's a
No,
lot of stuff.
it said live tree trimming.
Okay, yeah.
All right.
Just the annual tree trimming, this year's quadrant will be the northeast side of town. Jerry's estimated that at around $100,000.
That's that older part of town, older trees. So that'll be,
Out Hillsborough, out 309, out Mazer, out North. So it reaches east pretty far, but it's just the annual cleanup of the.
Sounds like more to the east than to the north, though. More to the east than to the north, would you say?
It'll be all the way out North Market to
Columbus?
I think all the way to Grant Road,
Okay.
Fairview,
Okay.
same all the way out.
Pretty straightforward.
Nope. I'll make the motion to move 2021-53 on to full council for
Mr.
consideration.
Ivy makes the motion. I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Next is discussion, OWDA.
This is discussion, Doc, and Mr. Ivy, it's, in looking at our water fund situation, we were taking a look at the debt service and looking at each one of the loans that we have. And there was a loan going back to '06 with the Ohio Water Development Authority that was largely, it appears, for stormwater projects. It was the Bueller Street, which included stormwater on Elmwood, Beechwood. Seems to me there's another street out there. And it was also the cleaning of Heisey Park. If you remember when they came in there and they installed what are called gabion baskets and all that. So it's that those two projects at least, but we borrowed about $400,000 more than those two projects cost. So without getting too deep into the weeds in the discussion and looking at going back and adjusting to have the stormwater pay for those, which in talking with the state auditor yesterday, we'll have to demonstrate that. I'm not sure it's worth going back and correcting that. But going forward, I really want council to look at paying the annual debt service on this loan, which is about $76,000, half from water, half from sewer, paying that out of storm sewer. The two projects listed in the ordinance are clearly stormwater projects. And I don't want to get into why they decided to pay it out of 601 and 603. But I think going forward, it's clearly in our interest to go ahead and begin to pay that out of stormwater and, if you will, ease up. It would provide another $75,000 into the water fund to build the balance or to be used in any kind of future capital projects. So that's the idea, that's the discussion. We're about maybe 80% through the research on what else was funded at that time. It's kind of hard to...
So, just to paraphrase it, projects were borrowed and completed, but the loan amount exceeded.
I think we
actual
paid it
cost.
out of the wrong funds. That's
Okay,
what
so we still have a balance. This is not for new projects.
No, it's at 800,000, I think. Eunice, is that not, didn't you, when we were looking at that we still owe 800,000?
Yeah, it was just under that.
Yeah. So if we were like on the home stretch, I would say I just keep paying it out of, no harm, no foul. It's a utility enterprise fund. But because we still have significant years of payment, it seems to me that it's more appropriate to pay that out of the stormwater fund.
So the 76,000 number is our annual debt service?
For that project.
How long? Yes.
Before this conversation goes any further, we also had a conversation with Belinda at the auditor's office, and that is the wrong project. The project was the Cheshire project, and it was water and sewer. So it is coming out of the appropriate funds.
Well,
I'm not sure what their conversation was, but mine was with Cindy, and initially she said that it was for Cheshire when the sewer was leaking into the wells, so that's what they based it on and justified it on. But if you guys had conversation based on the ordinance and how the ordinance reads, I don't know what that was. But I do have an email in writing from the state auditor saying that we are to continue to pay it 50/50 from the water and sewer right now. Now, I don't know if that means if you guys come up with something, we also discussed the correction journal that we could do. So this was the first that I knew that you guys had a conversation, so I don't know what all that entailed either.
Teamwork. Eroding public teamwork. That's my only comment.
Teamwork.
Okay.
So do you feel that
That's
probably,
gonna be,
will that be maybe an ordinance form by next month if 80% of the research is done, or since we're just having this
I tell you
discussion?
what, that we need to rectify any kind of differences between the auditor's office
Okay.
and the mayor's office.
Great.
It's,
And the other concern that we discussed, Aaron, to address that, is the payment that comes out July 1st.
Okay,
So we were kind of put under a crunch for time and stuff on that, and that's why I brought up and suggested the correction journal, so that if those payments do come out of 601 and 603, and it's determined that it could come out of 608 being stormwater, we can do a correction journal then for that and put that money back.
okay.
I don't think Cindy was with was she with that office when this was done, 07?
She said, when, in my conversation with her, she said it went back to Esther.
Yeah, I know.
I'm gonna guess that she was not, and she was talking with Belinda since it predated her.
Yeah, so the stormwater project on Bueller and the Gabion baskets, that money was borrowed. That was borrowed by
It's
OWD.
our understanding it's not this money. This money.
Well, what money is it?
Borrowed money for the Cheshire project. Is the understanding we have.
That was the
The-
description the state auditors had.
The $400,000 was that is kind of, so these two projects are $850 of the 1.2 million roughly that was borrowed. And what we're trying to track down here, the 20% is, it looks as though some of that money is being paid for the Cheshire project, which I think most of us think is an assessment project paid by the people who got the service. No, man, it's not. It's been getting this contribution to that project to the tune of $75,000 a year from the water and sewer customers. So, I mean, if you look at the dates on all this stuff, they echo of what happened just a few weeks later. And I don't want to maybe pick that scab, but it's really there were several major transactions that were done by Mr. Hunzy right before this whole thing fell apart. That's when the commitment, and then it's in 06, 07, long after Mr. Bauer was gone, when the debt's done.
Okay.
If you guys refer to page 62 of the recovery plan from 2018, I believe it is, that this one was last updated, that's the one that we're looking at that this covers on page 62. Gives you I pulled that up there, and it's like 793,000 is the balance.
Okay.
So it's worth getting to the bottom of when we look at the amount of capital improvements that water and sewer utilities needs.
Okay.
That's the only reason it came up. And if there was 70,000 yet, I'd say let it ride, but getting to the bottom of when there's 800,000, I think is worth the time, so
Okay.
that's the discussion done.
Gotcha. Next item on the agenda, we had talked last time about elected official salaries, and I had April do some research on past positions under the city manager form of government. And I forwarded the email to Mr. Ivy. I apologize, no one else in the room got it, and I'll correct that. But just to kind of give you an example, that in 2005, which was the effective date, the city manager was at $40 an hour. What does that translate to?
80,000 a year?
So then,
80 and change.
thank you.
Mhm.
the city manager in 2008. We had a sudden change in administration about that time. He was paid bi-weekly, about top end at $6,000 a month.
So he took a pay cut.
There's also some pay ranges. Finance director, which is what the auditor's position was called at that time. The 2010 maximum annual was $67,000. I don't know the.
I don't see the law director anywhere. That's what I've been looking for.
It's down there.
Is it? Okay.
Anyway, I guess my point is that, these are just decades-old numbers, and not wanting to, okay, here's 2011, the finance director was at $4,600 a month. At any rate, my question to you, Mr. Palmer, is how do we come up with numbers? I mean, that aren't, we're just not arbitrarily pulling them out of the hat and, that are fair. I know we've got some numbers, or that's not a fair question for you to answer, and I retract that. What kind of ordinance form do we need? One for each individual position?
Yes. The last time this was done was in 2013, and it was individualized ordinances for, in the case of the auditor and the law director, that was on the same ordinance, but yes.
Okay.
All the elected officials were on the same, you have president, you have president, council, auditor.
Julie might be absolutely
Yeah.
true. That might be true.
Yeah, you had all.
I know the judge and law director were on the same, they could have been the mayor.
Yeah, and then the
Okay.
council was on a separate one.
Right.
Right, and then when they redid, the auditor was on, and the mayor, they were redone again, because they increased the mayor and the auditor, I think, and everybody else stayed the same.
Just, to your question, Aaron, the law director was truly part-time, because I believe he was also the law director in Ontario, and his agreement was.
4192.
Yeah,
Okay.
40,000.
And not to be nosy, is that, as far as your class, I know we don't, it's not classification as far as part-time and full-time, but would you consider the amount of hours that you put in full-time hours or part-time hours?
Well, again, what I think you need to be careful as you go down this path is to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. That law director position before also had an assistant law director with it. The assistant law director, when I started, was making in the high 50s. So he was making more than the actual law director was. He was making more than I was when I started. Dave Keller was. So, my entire budget for just the law director and the assistant law director salaries has gone from approximately almost between 90 and 100,000, and now it's at about 60. No, I take it back, about 80,000. It's gone down. And that's because I've moved the assistant law director work, which is the prosecuting work, to Crawford County through contract with them.
Okay.
It's worked out really well.
Yeah, Dave was a full-time employee, had full-time
Yes,
benefits,
sure.
longevity.
And not pointing fingers or, anything like that. And you're right, making a fair comparison is important. Another question to you, Mr. Palmer, is this a subject that we could have discussion in full council?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely, have to decide in full council.
Right. So, I mean, this is, we went from a extremely general idea, 2 months ago. We cannot wait
Correct.
for another finance committee meeting.
Right.
So the time is now.
And that is because by August 4th, it has to be decided.
5 days before.
5 days before?
By the second council meeting of July. you need to
So
have this done.
my proposal is that we put this on the agenda for Tuesday night, and I will have this email distributed to everybody.
Do you want us each to make recommendations
I
for
think-
salaries
I
and
think
things like
that
that?
would be,
Okay.
Appropriate. And
May I ask
Yeah.
sorry, Mr. Baldinger, where's our auditor currently at? Just for,
It's 39.
is it, okay, thank you.
Would you take a recommendation from the elected officials themselves or input?
Certainly.
Because I would respectfully suggest that the law director's salary remain the same, but that the benefits are consistent. That has been an issue, and I think the benefits for the mayor, the auditor, and the law director need to be made consistent with each other and consistent with the other employees.
As far as,
They don't have any.
that's what I was going to say, the option of
No,
having them or not?
I have the option of doing it, but I have to pay, I think, 15% of my premium. It's different, it's just, it's a different.
It's really a cobbled, sounds like. It was
It was.
all three of the administrative offices. The fourth administrative office, I think, I'm not sure that's ever been considered for benefits. But it's uneven. The mayor has it's just
It's not.
none. And then there was, with the auditor and the law director, it's kind of uneven. They get medical, they don't get dental and vision or something. It's kind of
I just think a good baseline is that if we have 100 city workers and elected officials, the elected officials in question should have the same exact options for, at least an option for identical plans as the city workers, and start from there.
The same percentages.
For our office.
Exactly.
Everyone will rejoice with that.
To me, like I said in the last finance committee meeting, you guys literally are running a multi-million-dollar business, and some of you are making less than a typical Walmart greeter. So, sorry, I just feel strongly about
Two
it.
things about that, if I might. The benefits as it relates to the mayor's salary. If a mayor were to take a family plan, it would double the out-of-pocket for the taxpayer. You get close to 30, man, for, what is it, for family, 32? Something like that, isn't it? $32,000. So I hear what you're saying, well, that would be fair and that'd be equitable, but it's like, man. Other thing I would want to say on that, two more things I would say on that. One is, just drive around, like you see people walking around and make a judgment whether or not they have insurance or not. Many people in this community don't. In fact, our employees and the school employees are the only people in town, employers, that have what you would call traditional insurance, union guaranteed. Here's my thing on, since time. You ought to pay the mayor the median income. You ought to adjust it every 5 years. And all this other stuff, because the mayor of Bucyrus knocks down 50 and somebody else takes the taxpayers of Marion for a ride. It ain't right, man. You need to pay median income. If we're any good, we'll raise it. We've raised it, well, from 30 to 35, or maybe inflation has. So it's gone up in the last few years. I feel good about that. But, I shouldn't have a better insurance option than the guys pay my salary. So that's how I feel about that. Pay me 30, not pay me, pay the job 30. I'm of a different opinion. Don't have any benefits. That would be my recommendation on the mayor's office.
we'll put it on the agenda
Yep.
for Tuesday.
Sounds good.
Now on to the financials. That's why everybody bought a ticket tonight. New fund ordinance 2021-54.
That is the new fund, Eunice, for the 629 money for the, what, the Brantville project, or?
I'm not
Go ahead.
making it specific to 629,
Okay.
that's why I came up with the, I
Right.
tried to give it a more generic name of the roadwork development.
It's a good idea.
Grant. Well, if you recall, we had some brief discussion on that, so that if we have other similar grant funds, we can use that same fund number.
Yeah, we got 75,000, we think, from Jobs Ohio, and rounding that project out.
Jobs and Commerce.
Huh?
Jobs and Commerce.
Yeah, what did I say, Jobs Ohio? It's Jobs and Commerce. In any case, we still have a bit of a gap on that, and I'm not sure if that is gonna be filled with vibrancy money, or if we'll have to look at some other, more traditional funding sources. But this ordinance sets up the fund.
And we did have approval from the state auditor's office to create the fund.
Comments? Can I have a motion?
Sure.
to move-
2021-54 onto full council for consideration.
I'll second that. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Next item is amending 2021 appropriations. Ordinance 2021-55.
I guess I'll take that one.
Thank you.
In the past, we generally haven't budgeted for advances. The state auditors are now looking for this to be budgeted in a more consistent manner. So with that in mind, Section 2 appropriates unappropriated general funds to an advance outline. This includes the 629 funds that we anticipate, along with the 75,000 to go into that newly created roadwork development grant. Section 3 then advances those funds to a revenue line in 421, which is the roadwork development grant fund. And then Section 4 would appropriate those same funds to the capital expense line for infrastructure, which is where we believe all the expenses will be for the project.
Pretty cut and dry.
Any comments?
I'll make the motion, Doc, to send 2021-55 on to full council.
Mr. Ryan makes the motion. I second. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. And now we get to the roadway grant itself. Ordinance 2021-56, the logical conclusion.
Yeah, this is just basically allowing council allowing Nikki to receive the money.
Okay, the acceptance of grant.
I'll make the motion, 2021-56, to move on to full council.
Mr. Ivy makes the motion. I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. And we'll move to ordinance 2021-56 on the full council. Any other business?
I know it's real late, and with CARES Act, this would be for the auditor's office. With the CARES Act money, do they need to pass legislation to designate the use of the remaining CARES Act?
That would be a lot.
Yeah, okay, because we didn't have that on there, but I think Kara had an idea. I don't think it's CARES Act eligible, but that's maybe Thomas.
No,
But the
I'm with you
two
on
that
that.
I would really like to move on relatively soon here, but there's not legislation for it, I'm not sure you need it, is a small pool of, let's say, 150,000 to United Way. They're still working on that so that they can do the utility assistance. And then the balance of that, I think that the chamber is probably the likely candidate to do another business distribution.
If I
So
could,
those are the
I'm
two.
leaning towards those exact two areas as far as supporting the mayor's idea, as far as United Way, and as far as the grants to local businesses as well.
So, the question to you, Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Is we need legislation
Well-
to that effect?
If we put our collective memories together, Julie, correct me if I'm wrong, there were expenditures from the mayor's office that did not have the legislative pre-approval. And then we, at the end of the year, remember, we approved all of those that had taken place. You remember that?
Yes.
So I know that we did before. That doesn't mean it's not a good idea to do that. But what we did last year were there were several expenditures that had taken place during the year, and council, we did a catch-all ordinance at the end of the year, you might remember, where they were all listed, and the auditor's office did killer work with this and put it all together, and we approved them all.
May I make a suggestion?
Sure.
That you draft
Sure.
ordinances for the two one ordinance to designate where those funds are gonna go.
Yeah, I know the mayor wants that easy to do.
Because the only thing I remember was what a nightmare the end
Yep.
of last year was.
For them.
So
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you to please do that.
And if I could, Dr. Fellner, how much money are we talking, Mayor?
I think there's
300,000?
350.
So how much did you have in
There's a
mind?
right around 350, so 200 in the business and 150. I think once that's set up, let's say United Way after Labor Day.
Yep.
It's just not going real well. You'd have the flexibility to put that over in the business.
Okay.
Yeah, you talked about setting a deadline
Yes.
for that, so that we would be able to take care of any remaining funds before the end of the year.
And United
Because
Way
business
is
is still
still
hurting.
kind
Huh?
of designing.
Yeah, she's
plan.
working on it, and it's
Okay.
been, I haven't talked with her, but I know she's been talking with other people in the mayor's office about how that would work. Okay. Tom
Just
said.
timing wise, Doc, is this the kind of thing where you would like to have that drafted up and we can vote it on the agenda for Tuesday? Or would you like to see it at the next finance meeting?
No, I don't, I would like legislation for Tuesday.
Okay.
And maybe if we did,
151.57.
Yeah.
And if we
I
didn't-
can't make this work.
and if we put it on next Tuesday and needed to go through a few readings, we would still have plenty of
That's a good
time
point, Aaron.
Sure.
without creating total chaos for those two back there, so.
Yes.
Any other business?
Thank you for letting me add that.
Certainly.
I'll make a motion to, I'm sorry, Doc, go ahead.
Next meeting is set for July 21st at 7 PM. May I have a motion for adjournment?
I'll make
please?
the motion to
Mr. Ryan
adjourn.
makes the motion. I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Adjournment at 8:28.
Have a great night, everybody.